Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today in support of an important piece of legislation I've introduced that would bring an end to the dangerous existence of sanctuary cities, the Stop Sanctuary Policies and Protect Americans Act. The Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996 included language that specifically prohibits state and local governments from enacting sanctuary policies. Despite this, cities continually violate that provision by having sanctuary policies in place. If these cities and localities want to continue to blatantly disregard federal law, they should no longer receive certain federal funds. Now, sanctuary policies that we're talking about fall into two categories. One, ordinances that bar city employees from asking about a person's immigration status under any circumstances. And two, policies that prevent them from reporting a suspected illegal alien to federal immigration law enforcement authorities. These sanctuary policies and sanctuary cities that enact them are dangerous and counterproductive to both law enforcement efforts and reducing illegal immigration. We know that there are many instances in which an illegal alien is released by local authorities and then commits a very serious crime, sometimes a murder, a fatal crime. By now, we all know of the tragic event that renewed our focus on this issue back in July, the murder of a 32-year-old woman named Kate Steinle in San Francisco. Kate's suspected murderer was an illegal immigrant who had been deported 5 times previously and was released this past April by local law enforcement who, specifically citing San Francisco's sanctuary cities laws, defied a request by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials to hold him for deportation proceedings. If this illegal immigrant had been held for deportation proceedings instead of being set free, Kate Steinle would be alive today. Period. End of story. Unfortunately, San Francisco is far from the only city in the country carrying out this dangerous policy, and Kate Steinle is far from the only victim of a serious crime committed by an illegal immigrant under these sort of circumstances. On July 24th, 2015, Marilyn Ferris was brutally raped, tortured, and murdered in her home in Santa Maria, California, by an illegal immigrant who was released from custody because the county sheriff does not honor detainers. Again, a clear instance that would be stopped but for sanctuary policy. On July 27th, 2015, an illegal immigrant was arrested and accused of killing 60-year-old Margaret Kostelnick in Ravenna Road, Ohio. Before murdering Ms. Kostelnick, the man allegedly attempted to rape a 14-year-old girl and shoot a woman in a nearby park. The suspect also was previously in the custody of law enforcement, but released because the Department of Homeland Security refused to issue a detainer and take custody of the suspect, a related problem. On July 30th, a 2-year-old girl was brutally beaten by an illegal immigrant in San Luis Obispo County, California. He was released from local custody despite a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detainer and extensive criminal history. Other cases include last year when a Virginia man who killed a Catholic nun in a drunk driving crash was revealed to be an illegal alien who had been previously arrested. An illegal alien committed a shocking execution-style murder of 3 college students in the sanctuary city of Newark, New Jersey several years ago. He had been arrested twice before this grisly crime, and in the aftermath of the murders, the Attorney General of New Jersey effectively eliminated Newark's sanctuary city policy. Now, according to documents uncovered by a Freedom of Information Act request by the Center for Immigration Studies, ICE lists at least 340 cities defying federal law, providing safe haven to illegal immigrants, including my original hometown of New Orleans. These policies, again, are in direct infringement of federal law. and it's simply unacceptable. Worse still, these cities are actively releasing criminal illegal immigrants back into our communities instead of working cooperatively with federal officials to deport them or lock them up. I firmly believe it's time to reverse these illegal policies, to bar them once and for good. And that's why I have joined on this crucial piece of legislation with Senators Toomey, Grassley, Cruz, Johnson, Cornyn, Sullivan, Perdue, Isaacson, Rubio, Barrasso, and Thune. We're introducing this legislation. We're getting a vote tomorrow to end the practice of sanctuary cities violating existing federal immigration law. This legislation takes a common sense approach to this problem, and there are three key parts to the bill. First, this bill changes the incentives for cities by creating penalties for states, local governments, and law enforcement entities that choose to have these policies in place. These penalties come in the form of the removal of certain streams of federal funding for sanctuary jurisdictions, and the penalties apply to whatever government entity is actually making that bad decision. In cases where a law enforcement entity, like a jail or a police department, has a policy or practice that refuses to comply with federal immigration law, they will be prevented from receiving community-oriented policing services grants or state criminal alien assistance program grants. So that entity directly will be penalized. They are making the bad decision. If, on the other hand, a state or city council or executive passes a resolution or implements a policy or practice that refuses to comply with federal immigration law, then the city or that entity will no longer be available for community development block grant funds. So again, we penalize the specific entity, public official involved. It's important that federal funds are withheld from the entity that makes the dangerous decision to allow dangerous illegal immigrants to walk free rather than turning them over to Department of Homeland Security. Second, we've seen the willingness of jurisdictions to comply with immigration detainers decrease in recent years due to litigation pursued by the ACLU. We know dozens of jurisdictions that want to cooperate and were cooperating, but became sanctuary cities in reaction to these lawsuits. Our legislation deals with this threat head-on. It grants local law enforcement the clear authority to always comply with ICE detainers. However, it's important to note we have been very careful to protect individual rights and have preserved an individual's right to sue for a violation of their civil or constitutional rights. But if the problem was with the detainer, then the individual will sue ICE and not the local law enforcement officials. The third and final part of this legislation deals directly with those who continue to cross our border illegally, and it establishes Kate's Law, appropriately named after Catherine Steinle, who I mentioned earlier. Kate's Law increases mandatory minimum sentence requirements for people who continue to cross the border illegally. Kate's Law will increase the maximum penalty for illegal re-entry from 2 years to 5 years. It also creates a maximum penalty of 10 years for illegal immigrants who have been denied admission, excluded, deported, or removed 3 or more times, and then illegally re-enter the country. In order to ensure appropriate treatment of criminal illegal immigrants,